Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. What if I told you a single discovery changed the fate of a nation? A discovery so powerful that it set off one of the largest human migrations in history, reshaped economies, fueled dreams of fortune, and even played a role in shaping the very borders of the United States. This is the story of the California Gold Rush, a turning point that transformed not just a state, but the entire trajectory of a young nation. In January 1848, at a small mill along the American River in California, James W. Marshall noticed something shimmering in the water: gold. What followed was an explosion of hope, desperation, and ambition that pulled hundreds of thousands of people from across the country and around the world into the untamed lands of the West. Within a year, California's population would skyrocket, towns would emerge overnight, wealthy merchants and cunning opportunists would strike it rich, often at the expense of those who dug in the dirt. The promise of easy fortune proved both an intoxicating dream and, for many, a devastating illusion. But the gold rush wasn't just about individual fortunes. It reshaped the entire American economy. It supercharged industries, spurred technological advancements, and helped fund the expansion of railroads and cities. Yet while some prospered, others suffered. Indigenous populations were displaced, often violently. Their lands were taken, their communities shattered, and their way of life forever changed by an influx of settlers who saw California as their new promised land. Beyond its immediate impact, the gold rush played a direct role in California's rapid path to statehood. By 1850, just 2 years after gold was discovered, California was admitted to the Union, fast-tracked because of its booming economy and strategic importance. But statehood came with complications. The addition of California as a free state added fuel to the growing sectional divide between North and South, further straining tensions that would eventually erupt into the Civil War, and the effects didn't stop there. The legacy of the gold rush can still be seen today, in the financial institutions that were born from it, in the diverse population of California that was shaped by waves of migration, and in the myth of the American dream that it helped to solidify. In this deep dive, we'll explore the full story: how gold fever gripped the world, how fortunes were made and lost, and how this chaotic, frenzied moment in history left a lasting imprint on America. Buckle up, because this is history at its most dramatic, unpredictable, and consequential. On a cold morning in January 1848, James W. Marshall, a carpenter and sawmill operator, stepped out onto the banks of the American River near Coloma, California. He was overseeing the construction of a sawmill for his employer, John Sutter, a Swiss immigrant and landowner who had ambitious plans to build an agricultural empire in the Sacramento Valley. As Marshall examined the newly built water channel, designed to power the mill, something caught his eye: small, bright flakes glistening in the water. He reached down, picked up a piece, and examined it closely. It was soft, malleable, and had a distinctive yellow hue. Marshall had just discovered gold. At first, he wasn't entirely sure. Gold had been found in small quantities before, but no one expected a major deposit in this part of California. To confirm his suspicions, Marshall and Sutter conducted simple tests, boiling the flakes in a kettle with lye and hammering them to see if they would flatten rather than break. Every test confirmed the same shocking truth: the flakes were indeed gold. But neither Marshall nor Sutter could have anticipated what was about to unfold. Initial skepticism and the spread of news at first, Sutter wanted to keep the discovery a secret. He feared that if word got out, his dream of building an agricultural empire would be overrun by gold seekers. He ordered his workers to remain silent, but in a small, tight-knit community, secrets don't stay buried for long. The news spread slowly at first, met with skepticism by many. After all, previous rumors of gold in California had turned out to be false alarms. But soon, word began to leak beyond the Sacramento Valley. The first real break came when a local merchant and newspaperman, Samuel Brannan, got wind of the discovery. Brannan, a savvy businessman, saw an opportunity. Before making the news public, he bought every pickaxe, shovel, and pan he could find. Then, in May 1848, he burst into the streets of San Francisco, holding up a vial of gold and shouting, "Gold, gold, gold from the American River." That moment was the spark that ignited the gold rush. Almost overnight, San Francisco, then a sleepy village with just a few hundred residents, emptied out. Shops closed, sailors abandoned their ships in the harbor, and workers left their jobs, en masse to head inland in search of gold. By the summer of 1848, the first wave of prospectors, later known as the 48ers, descended upon the riverbanks, sifting through dirt and gravel in hopes of striking it rich. The first wave of gold seekers. At first, most of the early prospectors were local residents, Californios, Mexican Californians, Native Americans, and American settlers who had moved to California before the discovery. They used simple methods like panning in riverbeds, an easy but time-consuming process. These early miners had a significant advantage. With little competition, they could pick up gold by the handful in some locations. Some lucky individuals found thousands of dollars worth of gold in just a few weeks, an unimaginable fortune at the time. But as summer turned to fall, the news continued to spread. By late 1848, soldiers from nearby military forts, sailors from Pacific shipping routes, and even a few adventurous pioneers from the Oregon Trail made their way to California. Then came the game changer. In December 1848, President James K. Polk confirmed the rumors in his State of the Union address. He declared to the nation that gold had indeed been discovered in California, showing off samples to Congress. His words were electrifying. Within months, the trickle of fortune seekers turned into a flood. By 1849, tens of thousands of people from across the country and the world were making their way to California. This was only the beginning. The discovery of gold had set off an unstoppable chain reaction, one that would reshape California, upend the lives of its indigenous people, and even push the United States closer to civil war. The gold rush had officially begun. By 1849, California was no longer a quiet, remote territory on the edge of the continent. It had become the center of a global frenzy. What had started as a local discovery in 1848 had, in just 1 year, exploded into an event that would pull in over 300,000 people from all corners of the world. These gold seekers, later known as the 49ers, would reshape the West forever. The rise of the 49ers, who were they? The term 49ers refers to the massive wave of gold seekers who arrived in 1849, but they were not a homogeneous group. They came from different backgrounds, classes, and nationalities, all drawn by the promise of instant wealth. The vast majority were young men, often in their 20s and 30s, looking for adventure and fortune. Many were Americans from the East Coast and Midwest, farmers, mechanics, laborers, and even some professionals who abandoned stable careers to try their luck. But the gold rush wasn't just an American affair. Tens of thousands of immigrants came from around the world, creating one of the first truly global migrations in modern history. Mexicans, Chileans, and Peruvians, many of whom had experience in gold mining, arrived early, bringing with them valuable knowledge of mining techniques. Chinese laborers began arriving in large numbers, bringing their own methods of gold extraction and establishing thriving communities despite facing extreme discrimination. Europeans, particularly from France, Germany, and Ireland, saw California as a land of opportunity, and some came as organized mining companies. Even Australians and South Pacific Islanders made the journey. This mass migration completely transformed California's demographics. Before gold was discovered, the non-native population of California was around 14,000. By 1852, it had exploded to over 250,000, but getting there was no easy task. The journey to California, dangers of the trek and sea routes. The 49ers took 3 primary routes to California, each with its own deadly risks. The overland route, the California Trail. The most popular and grueling route was by land, following the Oregon and California trails. Tens of thousands of people packed their belongings into covered wagons and set off on the 2,000-mile journey across the Great Plains, Rocky Mountains, and the harsh deserts of Nevada. The trek took 4 to 6 months and was fraught with dangers, disease, accidents, starvation, and brutal weather conditions. Cholera outbreaks killed thousands, while river crossings and steep mountain passes claimed many more lives. Some groups, like the infamous Donner Party a few years earlier, didn't make it at all. The Panama Shortcut. For those who could afford it, there was a faster, though still dangerous, alternative: sailing to Panama, crossing the jungle on foot or by mule, and then catching another ship to San Francisco. The Panama route cut travel time in half, but it came with risks of its own. The trek through the mosquito-infested jungles of Central America exposed travelers to deadly diseases like malaria and yellow fever. Many never made it out alive. The Cape Horn route. The longest but safest option was to sail all the way around the southern tip of South America, known as Cape Horn. The journey took 4 to 5 months, and sailors faced brutal storms and freezing temperatures while navigating the treacherous waters. Despite its length, thousands of people took this route to avoid the dangers of the overland and Panama crossings. Whichever route they chose, the 49ers arrived in California exhausted, often broke, and ready to dig for gold. But what they found was not always the paradise they had imagined. The role of San Francisco as a boomtown San Francisco as a sleepy little village of around 1,000 people before the gold rush became the gateway to the gold fields. When news of gold reached the world, ships packed with gold seekers arrived in the harbor daily. Some sailors even abandoned their ships upon arrival, eager to try their luck in the goldfields, leaving hundreds of vessels to rot in the bay. By 1850, San Francisco had exploded into a bustling, chaotic metropolis of over 25,000 people. Makeshift tents and wooden shacks filled the streets, and businesses sprang up overnight. Merchants rather than miners were often the real winners of the gold rush. Entrepreneurs like Levi Strauss, who sold durable denim pants, and Samuel Brannan, who monopolized mining supplies, made fortunes selling goods at massively inflated prices. A simple shovel that cost $1 on the East Coast could sell for $50 in San Francisco. But with rapid growth came lawlessness. San Francisco became notorious for its crime, corruption, and violence. There was no formal government, no police force, and little legal authority. Gambling halls, saloons, and brothels dominated the city, and vigilante justice became the norm. The lack of law enforcement made San Francisco a dangerous place, where disputes were often settled with knives and pistols. The emergence of mining towns and lawlessness. Beyond San Francisco, towns sprouted up almost overnight near the richest gold fields. Places like Sacramento, Stockton, and Placerville, nicknamed Hangtown for its frequent lynchings, became hubs for miners looking for supplies and entertainment. These mining towns were rough and lawless. In the early days, there were no official legal systems, and disputes over claims often led to violence. Claim jumping, where one miner would steal another's land, was rampant, and many miners carried weapons to defend their stakes. Some turned to crime, forming gangs that roamed the gold fields, robbing and even murdering those who struck it rich. In response, some communities formed vigilante groups to enforce their own rough version of justice. Lynchings were common, and suspects were often executed without a trial. It wasn't until California became a state in 1850 that some level of order was established, but even then, the remote mining camps remained dangerous places. Despite the hardships, the dream of gold kept people coming. By 1852, gold production in California peaked, with over $80 million worth of gold extracted that year alone. But for many, the reality of gold mining was brutal. Few struck it rich, and most ended up exhausted, broke, or worse. The gold rush had created an economic boom, turned California into the land of opportunity, and forever changed the West. But it had also brought chaos, lawlessness, and suffering, especially for Native Americans and others caught in the rush's destructive wake. The feverish quest for gold had reshaped California, and the impact of those wild years would be felt for generations to come. The California gold rush wasn't just about individual fortunes. It was an economic earthquake that shook the foundations of the American economy and reverberated across the world. While most prospectors dreamed of striking it rich by panning for gold, the real winners of the gold rush were often the merchants, bankers, and industrialists who capitalized on the chaos. The sudden influx of wealth spurred the rise of powerful businesses, accelerated the expansion of infrastructure, and even helped solidify the United States' position as a rising global power. The rise of banks and businesses, Levi Strauss and Wells Fargo. One of the most immediate economic effects of the gold rush was the rapid growth of businesses catering to miners. As thousands of men poured into California, they needed food, clothing, tools, and supplies, all of which were in short supply. Opportunistic entrepreneurs seized the moment, and many of the companies that emerged during the gold rush would go on to become household names. Levi Strauss & Co., a German immigrant, named Levi Strauss, arrived in San Francisco in 1853, intending to sell durable fabric to miners. He soon realized that the rough working conditions in the goldfields demanded stronger clothing. Partnering with tailor Jacob Davis, Strauss developed sturdy, riveted denim pants, what we now know as blue jeans. These tough, practical pants became an instant hit among miners and would eventually turn Levi Strauss & Co. into an American icon. Wells Fargo & Co. Founded in 1852 by Henry Wells and William Fargo, this banking and express company was designed to serve the booming California economy. Gold miners needed a safe way to transport their findings, and businesses needed reliable financial services. Wells Fargo became known for its stagecoach delivery service, transporting gold, mail, and passengers across the rugged West. The company's reputation for security and efficiency helped lay the foundation for the modern banking system in the American West. Ghirardelli Chocolate, another immigrant success story. Domenico Ghirardelli, an Italian chocolatier, saw an opportunity to sell sweets to the growing population. He founded what would become Ghirardelli Chocolate Company, a brand still beloved today. Beyond these famous names, thousands of small businesses, saloons, general stores, blacksmiths, boarding houses, sprang up to serve the growing population. The real gold, it turned out, wasn't just in the rivers and mountains, but in the commerce that surrounded it. How the gold rush fueled the U.S. economy. The sudden injection of gold into the American economy had massive implications. By 1852, California's gold fields were producing over $80 million worth of gold per year, a staggering sum at the time. This new wealth didn't just stay in California, it spread across the entire country. Expansion of banking and finance. The influx of gold bolstered the nation's money supply, strengthening banks and increasing lending power. Financial hubs like New York City benefited as investors, and speculators poured money into Western ventures. Rise of American industry. With new wealth circulating, demand for manufactured goods surged. Companies in the East produced tools, machinery, and transportation equipment for the expanding West. The increased flow of gold also strengthened U.S. trade with Europe and Asia. Real estate and urban growth. San Francisco and other California cities saw land values skyrocket. What had once been empty land was now some of the most valuable property in the country. The gold rush transformed San Francisco from a tiny settlement into a thriving metropolis almost overnight. Expansion of railroads and infrastructure, perhaps. One of the most lasting economic impacts of the gold rush was its role in accelerating the expansion of railroads and infrastructure in the American West. The Transcontinental Railroad. The massive migration to California highlighted the desperate need for better transportation. At the time, crossing the country was a months-long, dangerous journey by wagon or ship. Recognizing the importance of linking the East and West, the U.S. government prioritized railroad expansion. The gold rush directly helped fund and fuel support for the Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869. This railroad would become the backbone of American commerce, allowing for faster movement of goods, people, and resources across the country. Roads, bridges, and ports. As California's population surged, state and local governments invested heavily in building roads, bridges, and harbors. San Francisco became the West Coast's most important port city, facilitating trade with Asia and Latin America. The infrastructure boom wasn't just about moving gold, it was about integrating California into the rest of the United States. The gold rush had turned the state from a distant frontier into a vital economic hub. Global impact. Immigration from China, Latin America, and Europe. The gold rush wasn't just a national event. It triggered one of the largest global migrations of the 19th century. California became a magnet for people seeking fortune and opportunity from all over the world. Chinese immigration. The largest non-European immigrant group to arrive during the gold rush was the Chinese. By 1852, over 25,000 Chinese immigrants had come to California, making up nearly 10% of the state's population. They brought valuable mining techniques, a strong work ethic, and a sense of community. Many Chinese miners worked claims that others abandoned, extracting gold from seemingly depleted areas. Others took jobs building infrastructure, laying the groundwork for their critical role in constructing the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1860s. However, they also faced severe discrimination. Laws were passed forcing them to pay a foreign miner's tax, and anti-Chinese sentiment led to violent attacks. Despite this, Chinese immigrants persevered, establishing Chinatowns in cities like San Francisco, which remain cultural landmarks today. Latin American influence. Thousands of Mexicans, Chileans, and Peruvians arrived in California, many of whom were experienced gold miners. They brought advanced mining techniques, such as the use of long toms and sluice boxes, which increased gold extraction efficiency. However, they too faced racism and violence, as American miners often resented their presence. European migration. The promise of gold attracted tens of thousands of Europeans, particularly from France, Germany, Ireland, and Italy. Many of these immigrants settled permanently in California, contributing to the state's cultural diversity. Irish immigrants fleeing the Great Famine arrived in large numbers, often taking jobs in construction, law enforcement, and business. A legacy of economic transformation. The economic boom triggered by the gold rush reshaped not only California, but the entire nation. It set the stage for the rapid industrialization of the United States, strengthened its financial institutions, and solidified the country's role in global trade. By the mid-1850s, gold production began to decline, and the dream of easy riches faded. But the infrastructure, businesses, and population growth the gold rush had sparked remained. California would continue to be a land of opportunity, innovation, and economic power, long after the last prospector had left the gold fields. The gold rush wasn't just about striking it rich. It was about building a future, one that would shape the course of American history for generations to come. The California gold rush wasn't just an economic or political turning point, it was a social and cultural revolution. The sudden influx of people from around the world created an explosive mix of cultures, traditions, and conflicts. California became one of the most diverse places in America overnight, but it was also a place of lawlessness, discrimination, and survival at any cost. The gold rush shaped the American identity, giving rise to legendary figures, folklore, and a new frontier spirit that would influence the nation for generations. Diverse communities and racial tensions. Before the gold rush, California was sparsely populated with Native Americans, Mexicans, and a small number of European settlers living in relative isolation. But by 1850, California had transformed into one of the most diverse regions in the world. People from across the United States and around the globe poured into the state, creating a chaotic mix of cultures. However, with diversity came deep racial tensions. Native Americans, the greatest losers of the gold rush group, suffered more from the gold rush than California's Native American population. Before 1848, an estimated 150,000 Native Americans lived in the region, many of them members of small, semi-nomadic tribes. The sudden arrival of thousands of miners led to widespread displacement, violence, and death. Land seizures. Miners and settlers encroached on native lands, often driving entire tribes out of their territories. Massacres and violence. Many settlers viewed Native Americans as obstacles to be removed. Raids and massacres became common, with vigilante groups hunting Native people. Some were even paid bounties by the California government for killing or capturing Native men, women, and children. Disease and starvation. The introduction of European diseases, combined with the destruction of natural food sources, led to a massive decline in the native population. By 1870, their numbers had been reduced to fewer than 30,000, a catastrophic loss. Mexican and Latin American miners at the start of the gold rush. Many experienced miners from Mexico, Chile, and Peru arrived in California, often bringing advanced techniques that helped extract gold more efficiently. However, resentment from American miners quickly turned into discrimination and violence. Foreign miners' tax. In 1850, California passed a tax targeting non-American miners, forcing them to pay high fees simply to work their claims. Mob attacks and expulsions. Many Latin American miners were attacked, beaten, or even killed by Anglo miners who saw them as competition. Some were driven out of the goldfields entirely. Chinese immigrants, hard work, bigotry, and Chinatown. By 1852, over 25,000 Chinese immigrants had arrived in California, making up nearly 1/10 of the state's population. They were often willing to take on backbreaking work that others avoided, such as reworking abandoned claims and building essential infrastructure. However, they faced intense discrimination. Targeted taxes and laws. The foreign miners. Tax was heavily enforced against Chinese workers. They were also banned from testifying in court, making it nearly impossible for them to seek justice if attacked or cheated. Violence and lynching, anti-Chinese riots broke out in several towns, and vigilante groups often targeted Chinese workers. The birth of Chinatowns. In response to hostility, Chinese immigrants established tightly knit communities, the most famous being San Francisco's Chinatown, which remains a cultural landmark today. African Americans and free black communities, although slavery was technically illegal in California, many Southern slave owners brought enslaved people to work in the goldfields. Some were able to buy their freedom with gold, while others were forced to continue laboring under brutal conditions. Despite discrimination, a small but thriving community of free black people emerged, particularly in San Francisco and Sacramento, where they started businesses and fought for civil rights. The rise of vigilante justice and crime in boomtowns. With no established legal system in place, California's gold camps and towns became lawless, violent, and unpredictable. Justice was often determined by the strongest or the fastest with a gun. Claim jumping. With gold at stake, claim disputes often turned violent. If a miner struck gold, others would try to steal his claim, sometimes at gunpoint. Banditry and highway robbery. Roads leading to and from mining towns became dangerous as bandits targeted miners carrying gold. Infamous outlaws, like Black Bart, became legends of the Wild West. Vigilante groups and lynch mobs. With no formal law enforcement, groups of citizens took matters into their own hands, forming vigilante committees to punish criminals. Suspected. Thieves and murderers were often hanged in public without trials. The role of women in the gold rush. Women were a rarity in the early years of the gold rush. In 1850, men outnumbered women in California by a ratio of nearly 20-1. But those women who did come often found opportunities to make money, not by mining, but by filling crucial roles in the growing economy. Businesswomen and entrepreneurs. Savvy women quickly realized that miners would pay a premium for goods and services. Women like Luzina Wilson made small fortunes by opening boarding houses, laundries, and restaurants. They could charge exorbitant prices for basic services, washing clothes, cooking meals, or even selling baked goods. Saloon owners and entertainers. Some women opened or worked in saloons and dance halls, catering to lonely miners eager to spend their gold. While some became successful business owners, many faced harsh and dangerous conditions. Prostitution and the dark side of the boomtowns. With few economic opportunities available to them, many women were forced into prostitution. The mining towns were filled with brothels, and life was often brutal for the women who worked in them. Some became wealthy madams who ran successful businesses, but many suffered from violence, disease, and exploitation. Despite the hardships, many women in California took advantage of the opportunities available and played a key role in shaping the society that would emerge after the gold rush. Influence on American culture and folklore. The gold rush left a lasting imprint on American culture, inspiring stories, songs, and legends that endure to this day. Western mythology and the American dream. The idea that anyone could strike it rich and rise from rags to riches became embedded in the American psyche. This notion of frontier opportunity would later influence the Wild West era and even modern concepts of Silicon Valley entrepreneurship. Legendary figures. The gold rush gave birth to real-life legends like Black Bart, the poetic bandit, Joaquin Murrieta, the Mexican Robin Hood, and Lotta Crabtree, a gold rush-era entertainer, who became one of the first female millionaires in America. Gold rush phrases and slang. Many terms that emerged during the gold rush remain part of American vocabulary today, including striking it rich, finding sudden wealth, panning out, referring to whether an effort is successful or not, stake a claim, laying claim to an opportunity. A society transformed. By the time the gold rush ended in the mid-1850s, California had changed forever. What had been a sleepy Mexican territory just a few years earlier was now a booming state with a diverse, complex society. It was a place of extraordinary wealth and extreme poverty, of dreams fulfilled and lives ruined. The gold rush had laid the foundation for modern California, shaping its economy, its culture, and its identity as a land of opportunity and reinvention. Even today, the echoes of the gold rush remain in California's entrepreneurial spirit, its diverse population, and its cultural mythology. The wild, chaotic years of the gold rush may have ended, but their impact on America is still being felt nearly 2 centuries later. The California gold rush is often remembered as a time of opportunity and fortune, but its darker consequences cannot be ignored. While some individuals struck it rich, others suffered greatly, especially Native Americans, foreign miners, and the environment itself. The rapid and unregulated expansion of gold mining devastated California's natural landscape, while racial tensions led to widespread discrimination, violence, and exclusionary laws. The legacy of these consequences still lingers today. Forced removal and violence against Native Americans. Before the gold rush, California was home to an estimated 150,000 Native Americans, belonging to dozens of distinct tribes. Many lived in small, semi-nomadic communities depending on the land for hunting, fishing, and agriculture. The arrival of gold-seeking settlers, however, would lead to one of the most devastating periods in Native American history. Loss of land and resources. With the discovery of gold in 1848, tens of thousands of settlers poured into California, often with little regard for the native people who had lived there for centuries. Traditional hunting and fishing grounds were destroyed, as miners diverted rivers and cleared forests. Native communities were driven from their land by prospectors and settlers who claimed it for themselves. The U.S. government encouraged displacement, signing treaties that were rarely honored and allowing settlers to take native land with impunity. The California genocide, the gold rush, triggered a wave of state-sponsored violence against Native Americans. In 1850, California became a U.S. state, and its first governor, Peter Burnett, openly called for the extermination of Native peoples. Militias and vigilante groups formed, launching attacks on Native villages, massacring men, women, and children. Bounty hunting became legal, with the California government paying settlers for each Native American killed or captured. A typical bounty was $5 per scalp or $50 per head. Slavery and forced labor were legalized under the 1850 Act for the Government and Protection of Indians, which allowed settlers to kidnap Native children and force them into servitude. Between 1848 and 1870, the Native American population in California plummeted from 150,000 to fewer than 30,000, marking one of the darkest chapters in American history. Environmental destruction. A ravaged landscape. The gold rush was an environmental catastrophe. Miners, desperate to extract as much gold as possible, used destructive techniques that permanently altered California's natural landscape. River pollution and mercury contamination. Early miners used panning and sluice boxes to extract gold from riverbeds. But as surface gold became scarce, miners turned to more destructive methods. Hydraulic mining, introduced in the 1850s, involved blasting away hillsides with high-pressure water cannons. This process washed away entire mountains and dumped millions of tons of sediment into rivers. Mercury poisoning became widespread as miners used mercury to separate gold from ore. An estimated 7,600 tons of mercury were released into California's rivers and waterways, contaminating fish and drinking water, effects that persist to this day. Deforestation and habitat. Los California's forests were cleared at an alarming rate to provide timber for mining operations, railroads, and new settlements. Wildlife habitats were destroyed, leading to the decline of species that native communities depended on for survival. The Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys, once rich in biodiversity, were transformed into industrialized mining zones. Flooding and land erosion. The sediment washed into rivers caused severe flooding, ruining farmland and displacing communities downstream. The most affected area was the Central Valley, which suffered massive floods in the 1860s due to mining. Debris clogging river channels. Hydraulic mining was eventually banned in 1884 by the Sawyer decision, but by then, much of California's landscape had already been irreversibly altered. Exploitation and discrimination against foreign miners. The gold rush attracted people from around the world, but not everyone was welcomed equally. Foreign miners, especially Chinese, Mexican, and South American immigrants, faced intense discrimination, heavy taxation, and outright violence. Chinese immigrants and the Chinese Exclusion Act. By the early 1850s, over 25,000 Chinese immigrants had arrived in California, hoping to make a better life. Unlike many American miners, they were patient and methodical, often extracting gold from claims that others had abandoned. However, their success led to widespread resentment. In 1852, California passed the foreign miners tax, forcing non-American miners to pay $20 per month, a massive sum at the time. This law was specifically aimed at Chinese and Mexican miners to drive them out of the gold fields. Chinese miners were often attacked and murdered by Anglo miners who saw them as competition. With no legal protections, they had little recourse. Despite their hardships, Chinese immigrants helped build California's infrastructure, later playing a crucial role in constructing the Transcontinental Railroad. By the 1870s, anti-Chinese sentiment had grown so extreme that the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was passed, banning all Chinese immigration to the U.S. for over 60 years. Mexican and Latin American miners, Mexican and South American miners had been working in California's gold fields long before Americans arrived, bringing advanced mining techniques that boosted productivity. However, racial hostility soon turned against them. Many were forcibly expelled from mining towns, often at gunpoint. The foreign miners' tax disproportionately affected Latin American miners, forcing many to leave. Some, like Joaquin Murrieta, resisted Anglo-American oppression, with Murrieta becoming a legendary outlaw figure, inspiring the later folk hero Zorro. A lasting legacy of injustice. The gold rush is often celebrated as a symbol of opportunity, but it came at a terrible cost. Native American communities were decimated, their lands stolen, and their cultures nearly erased. California's environment suffered irreversible damage, with mercury pollution, deforestation, and land erosion that still impact the region today. Foreign miners faced brutal exploitation and discrimination, setting a precedent for anti-immigrant laws that would persist for decades. While the gold rush helped shape modern California and fuel America's economic rise, its negative consequences remind us that progress often comes with a price. The stories of those who suffered, the displaced Native Americans, the exploited Chinese laborers, and the forgotten Mexican miners, deserve to be remembered just as much as the success stories of those who struck it rich. Even today, California continues to grapple with the environmental damage and social inequalities that originated during the gold rush era. The rush for gold may have ended, but its impact lingers in the land, the laws, and the lessons it left behind. The California gold rush wasn't just an economic and social revolution. It reshaped the political landscape of the United States. The rapid influx of people, wealth, and ambition transformed California from a distant Mexican territory into a crucial state, forever altering the balance of power between North and South. California's statehood in 1850 accelerated the expansion of Manifest Destiny, inflamed tensions between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions, and contributed to the growing sectional divide that would eventually lead to the Civil War. The impact on California's statehood, 1850. Before 1848, California was a sparsely populated region under Mexican rule, with only a few thousand non-native settlers. However, the discovery of gold changed everything, a population boom and the need for government. By 1849, over 100,000 people had arrived in California, creating lawless, chaotic boomtowns with little governance. The sudden population explosion meant that California needed a formal government immediately. It could not remain an unorganized U.S. territory for long. The lack of federal oversight led California's leaders to skip territorial status entirely and apply directly for statehood. California's state constitution and the slavery question. In September 1849, California held a constitutional convention in Monterey. The most pressing issue was whether the new state would allow slavery. Many gold miners opposed slavery, not for moral reasons, but because they feared competition from wealthy plantation owners who could bring enslaved laborers to the goldfields. The convention overwhelmingly voted to ban slavery, making California a free state. This decision set the stage for a major political battle in Washington, D.C., as pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions fought over California's admission. The Compromise of 1850, California's bid for statehood, threatened to upset the balance between free and slave states in the U.S. Senate. At the time, there were 15 free states and 15 slave states. If California entered as a free state, it would tip the balance in favor of the North. To resolve this crisis, Congress passed the Compromise of 1850, a series of 5 laws designed to maintain peace between North and South. California was admitted as a free state, a win for the North. The Fugitive Slave Act was strengthened, requiring free states to return escaped enslaved people to their owners, a win for the South. The territories of New Mexico and Utah were allowed to decide on slavery through popular sovereignty, letting settlers vote on the issue. The slave trade was abolished in Washington, D.C., though slavery itself remained legal there. The SAW Compromise temporarily prevented a national crisis, but it exposed the deep divisions over slavery, making it clear that sectional tensions were far from resolved. Expansion of Manifest Destiny and conflicts with Mexico. The gold rush and California's rapid statehood played a key role in furthering Manifest Destiny, the belief that the U.S. was destined to expand across the continent. The Mexican-American War and California's annexation before gold was discovered. The U.S. had already set its sights on California. The Mexican-American War, 1846-1848, ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, in which Mexico was forced to cede California, Arizona, New Mexico, and other territories to the U.S. The treaty promised that Mexican landowners in California would have their property rights respected, but in reality, most lost their land to American settlers through legal loopholes and outright fraud. With California's statehood in 1850, Mexican Californios were politically and economically marginalized, losing much of their influence and property. Tensions with Native Americans and further displacement, California's rapid expansion, worsened conflicts between settlers and Native American tribes. The U.S. government and state militias launched campaigns to remove Native tribes from desirable land. In 1851, federal agents negotiated 18 treaties with California tribes, promising them land. However, Congress never ratified these treaties, leaving Native Americans landless. The California government actively encouraged the killing of Native people, offering state-funded bounties for their deaths. By the 1860s, Native Americans in California had been almost entirely displaced or exterminated, one of the most tragic consequences of Manifest Destiny. Political shifts and the road to the Civil War, while the gold rush helped make California wealthy and powerful, it also worsened national divisions that would soon lead to the Civil War. Sectional tensions between North and South California's admission as a free state in 1850 broke the balance of power in Congress, giving free states the majority. The South, increasingly worried about losing influence, demanded stronger protections for slavery, leading to the controversial Fugitive Slave Act. The gold rush drew thousands of anti-slavery Northerners to California, further entrenching it as a free state stronghold. Impact on national politics. California's economic boom strengthened the North by increasing trade and industry in free states. The state became a key player in railroad expansion, with Northern business leaders pushing for a transcontinental railroad that would connect California to the East Coast, further integrating it with the free states. Southern leaders, feeling increasingly marginalized, began pushing for secession in the 1850s. The gold rush as a catalyst for the Civil War. While the gold rush didn't directly cause the Civil War, it accelerated the conflicts that led to it. It forced the U.S. to confront the issue of slavery in newly acquired territories, making compromise increasingly difficult. It shifted economic power toward the North, weakening the South's influence. It reinforced the idea that the West would be dominated by free states, alarming Southern leaders who feared being permanently outnumbered. By the late 1850s, California had firmly aligned itself with the Union. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, California remained loyal to the North, sending gold and resources to support the Union war effort. Conclusion: the lasting legacy of California's statehood. The gold rush and California's rapid admission to the Union reshaped American history in profound ways. It sped up westward expansion, fueling the belief in manifest destiny. It triggered political battles over slavery, bringing the nation closer to civil war. It established California as an economic powerhouse, a status it still holds today. California's statehood in 1850 marked the beginning of a new era in American history, one defined by rapid growth, economic transformation, and deepening national divisions. While the dream of gold brought people from all over the world, it also exposed the fractures that would soon tear the country apart. The California gold rush may have ended in the mid-1850s, but its legacy continues to shape California and the broader world in profound ways. The sudden influx of people, wealth, and industry created lasting social, political, and economic changes that still resonate today. As independent prospectors faded into history, large-scale industrial mining took over, reshaping the state's economy and infrastructure. California's identity as a land of opportunity and innovation stems directly from this transformative period. Even in the modern era, new gold rushes emerge, whether in technology, cryptocurrency, or other speculative booms, following similar patterns of rapid wealth accumulation, risk-taking, and economic shifts. What happened after the boom? By 1855, the gold rush had reached its peak, and the days of easy-to-find gold were over. The era of individual prospectors sifting through riverbeds with pans was replaced by large-scale corporate mining operations. The decline of independent prospectors. In the early years of the gold rush, an individual with a pickaxe and a pan could strike it rich. But by the mid-1850s, most of the easily accessible gold had been mined. As competition increased, miners were forced into riskier and more labor-intensive methods, like tunneling deep into the earth or extracting lower-grade ore. Many small prospectors went bankrupt and either left California or took jobs working for larger mining companies. The state became increasingly dominated by corporations, which had the resources to invest in advanced mining technology, such as hydraulic mining and deep shaft excavation. The rise of large-scale mining as small miners disappeared, industrial-scale mining took over. Companies invested in massive operations that extracted gold more efficiently, but at an enormous environmental and social cost. Hydraulic mining, which used high-pressure water jets to erode entire hillsides, became widespread. The practice produced billions of dollars in gold but devastated California's rivers and farmlands, leading to major legal battles. In 1884, hydraulic mining was banned by the landmark Sawyer decision, as its debris was causing catastrophic flooding and ruining farmland in the Central Valley. Despite the decline of gold mining, California had already transformed into a permanent economic powerhouse, with agriculture, trade, and industry taking over as the state's new economic drivers. How the gold rush shaped California's identity and economy today. The gold rush permanently defined California as a land of opportunity, innovation, and reinvention. Its effects can still be seen in the state's culture, economy, and population diversity. Economic impact. California's rise as a global power. The wealth generated from the gold rush fueled massive infrastructure projects, including the Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, which connected California to the rest of the U.S. and helped establish San Francisco as a major financial hub. Industries like agriculture, banking, and transportation grew rapidly as gold wealth was reinvested into land, businesses, and innovation. Many of today's most iconic California companies, such as Levi Strauss, Blue Jeans, and Wells Fargo, banking and express services, were founded during the gold rush. The state's entrepreneurial spirit, seen today in Silicon Valley's tech boom, has its roots in the risk-taking culture of the 19th century miners. Cultural and demographic impact. California as a melting pot. The gold rush attracted immigrants from around the world, making California one of the most culturally diverse regions in the U.S. San Francisco became a global city, home to Chinese, Mexican, Irish, Italian, and Australian communities, a legacy that still defines the city today. The rush for gold established California's reputation as a land of dreams, reinforcing the California dream mentality that later fueled the Hollywood film industry, the Silicon Valley tech revolution, and the state's real estate booms. Modern parallels. Cryptocurrency and today's gold rushes. The psychology of the gold rush, speculation, risk-taking, and the dream of overnight wealth continues to drive modern economic booms. Cryptocurrency and the digital gold rush just. Like gold prospectors in 1849, early Bitcoin miners were able to make fortunes by being among the first to enter the market. As cryptocurrency matured, large-scale operations with specialized technology, like crypto mining farms, took over, similar to how corporate mining replaced individual gold panners. The volatility of crypto markets with huge gains and losses mirrors the boom and bust. Silicon Valley and tech startups. The innovation-driven culture of Silicon Valley has its roots in the gold rush era mentality of risk, reinvention, and speculative investment. Entrepreneurs today, like miners in the 1850s, chase after the next big opportunity, whether in AI, biotech, or space exploration. Just as San Francisco boomed during the gold rush, modern tech hubs like Palo Alto and San Jose have become modern boomtowns. Real estate and housing booms, land speculation during the gold rush made California's property values skyrocket, just as real estate booms today have made cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles some of the most expensive in the world. The rush for land in the 1850s mirrors today's bidding wars for property and tech company expansions, driving up housing costs and reshaping urban landscapes. Conclusion: the gold rush lives on. While the days of prospectors sifting for gold in California's rivers are long gone, the spirit of the gold rush still defines the state. California remains a place of ambition, speculation, and reinvention, whether in mining, technology, entertainment, or real estate. The patterns of boom and bust, rapid migration, wealth creation, and environmental consequences repeat themselves in new industries and eras. From cryptocurrency to Silicon Valley, the echoes of 1849 still resonate, proving that the desire to strike it rich, whether in gold, digital assets, or innovation, never truly fades. The California gold rush was more than just a moment in history. It was a turning point that reshaped America in ways still felt today. It fueled massive migration, drove economic expansion, and helped define California's identity as a land of opportunity. It accelerated the rise of industry, banking, and infrastructure while also sparking conflicts over Native American lands, racial tensions, and the growing divide between free and slave states. The spirit of the gold rush lives on in modern speculation, from cryptocurrency to Silicon Valley startups. The dream of striking it rich, the risks people take for wealth, and the booms and busts that follow remain part of our world. But here's the real question. Would you have risked it all for gold? Would you have left behind everything, traveled thousands of miles, and staked your claim in the untamed West? Let me know in the comments. What would you do if you found gold? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history's most incredible moments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.